Hey there, crewmates. Gabe from Nexus Core back at it again with another video. This one I am particularly excited for because we are going to be going over all of the purple cards coming out of Romance Dawn, and this is probably the color that I am most excited for once the super pre-release starts coming in September around my area. I'm probably going to be entering with the Kaido start deck, so being able to see the ways that I'll be able to upgrade that is what I'm most looking forward to. And here on the screen, we are starting with the first leader card being a king. But before we get into that, I just want to give a general reminder. We're only going to be going over the purple cards in this video. I'm saving the multicolored cards for another video after all of this. And again, I have seen very few of these cards. A lot of them were introduced in bulk. So I'm actually going to be reading a lot of these for the first time along with most of you watching. So we'll have a fun time being able to do all of that together. But we're going to go over the king leader, who has the general stats of a monocolored leader, so 5 life, 5 power. And during your turn, if you have 10 Dawn cards on the field, all of your opponent's characters lose 1,000 power. This is garbage. This is... If you're in the world of Yu-Gi-Oh! 5Ds, where you literally build your deck out of trash, this would be your leader. It doesn't do anything until turn 4 at the earliest if you're lucky, and minus 1000 is relatively insignificant because most problematic characters are either early game rush that you have no problem beating over, or late game big boys where 1000 really won't make the difference, and it only affects characters. It doesn't even affect the leader. If it worked on your opponent's leader, it might actually have some value, but they really disrespected King here with only being able to reduce it by 1000. This is just garbage. But next we have our first common being Urashima, throwback to him and that arc. So he is 7 cost, 9,000 power with counter 1 from the land of Wano with no effect. I don't think you're going to run this. There are just so many better cards that you can get for 7 mana out of it. It's not bad stat wise, but if you're going to be putting that much of an investment into a single card, you got to be getting a strong effect out of it. If it was like 1 or 2,000 power less, but it had rush, then maybe. But as it stands, I don't think that this is worth it. Next, the first rare which is ulti. I'm gonna drop a hot take right now. I never really cared about ulti, but I think this is some great art, so I know the ulti fans were gonna have some justice done for her. I just love the scale effect that they're doing for her hybrid form. So she is cost 2, strike attribute, power 3 for the Animal Kingdom pirates. On play, you can pay 1 to add a Dawn card from your Dawn deck and rest it. I quite like this, actually. A lot of the cards, at least in the start deck, involve discarding or having some other kind of effect, like the Jack from the start deck. It's 3 cost 4 power, and you have to discard to get that Dawn. This way, you only have to pay 1, so you don't actually have to lose any hard advantage. I don't know if this will make it into the final build, but I think this is a solid card that's actually worth looking at just because it's cheap. It's mana ram turn 3 if you don't have Onigashima for the or turn 2 rather, even if you're going first, because it's an effective 3 drop. So I think this is at least consideration and worth looking into. Next, we have our first secret rare, which is the big bad boy of the set, being the Kaido character. A major 10 cost with the strike attribute and 12,000 power. I think this is the only 10 cost card and the only card with that kind of power we've seen in this game up until this point. So he's really putting that 4 Emperor type to good use. So on play, it is Dawn -6. If your leader is an Animal Kingdom pirate, KO all characters other than himself. So a thing that's worth keeping in mind is this does count your own. So if you don't have many characters, or your opponent just has so many more that you're willing to lose 1 or 2, then that's when you're going to want to play this. I think I am kind of torn on this. A board wipe is good, but in my experience with the few games I've played, really not a lot of decks are going to be having a full board, and you're going to, because you're playing the purple deck anyways, you're going to be easily killing off characters with other effects like Who's Who and King. So I don't know how well this will be used, at least in right now, especially because it costs 10. That means that if you're playing blue purple Kaido, you can't get any of the extra Dawn refund from the -6. And if you're playing the start deck Kaido, you can't use its Dawn -7 because you'll be down to 4. You can't even power up your leader, so you're going to have to hope that 5,000 is enough. I think this is another card that is definitely one you're going to want to have your hands on, just because as the game progresses and power creep hits and decks start being able to get at a lot more creatures faster, this is a thing that will definitely come to light, but I just don't know how valuable, especially for the cost, this will be in the early stages of the game. Part of me wishes it was like 2 cost less, but 3 or 4,000 weaker. I think something like that would make it a lot more likely to run, but the fact that it costs every single Dawn, much like the King Leader, it is just not going to be usable until turn 4, and it's a good equalizer, but really only if you're already far behind. But it's definitely something I would consider and recommend that you pick up if you're planning on ever playing purple, just because I think this will be useful as the game goes on. But next we have the uncommon Kyoshiro, and this is maybe some of my favorite art I've seen thus far. Just the detail on Kyoshiro, the color, the reflection of the moon. I think this is just beautiful to look at. But it's cost 5 slash attribute, 6,000 power, 1,000 counter from the land of Wano, and it's on play draw 1 if you have 8 or more Dawn on the field. I'm not wowed by this. I think that there are better ways to get draws than Kyoshiro, especially because you need to have 8 or more on the field anyways. So this is a thing that you're not really going to want to use probably until turn 4, even if you're playing a mana ramp deck. So I think the stats are fine, but you could probably do something better. I am not wowed by Kyoshiro, unfortunately. Then we have another SR being King, and again, just beautiful art. They're really popping off with the art for purple. It is 7 cost, special attribute, power 7, Animal Kingdom Pirate type, and on play you can go Dawn -2 to KO an opponent's character with 3 or less, and one opponent's character with a cost 2 or less. This is, I think, very solid. The King from the start deck, it's Dawn -1 for one character of cost 4 or less, and I really don't think that the difference between the 4 and the 3 and 2 is actually that much. I think most decks up till now are either running in the 5 and above or in the 3 or less. There are, of course, some solid 4s that will be seeing play, but I think relative to most decks, a lot of them are going to be having a cost 3 and 2 on the field at some point. So this is definitely a great one that I'd recommend picking up. And if you're playing blue-purple Kaido, you can easily make it the -2, a -1. So I think this is definitely worth the pickup. This is a great card. Next is the rare for Queen. Kind of mixed on this art. I'm not a huge fan, not going to lie. But he is cost 6, strike attribute, power 5, and counter 1,000. On play, you can go Dawn -1 to give it rush and give one of your opponent's characters -2,000. I think this is solid. I think purple really needed a better aggro game out of the start deck. It's solid at control, so it's able to bring the game down to your own pace and just slowly grind out a game. But being able to do damage quickly, I think, is good. I think that going Dawn -1, especially in purple, isn't that big of a deal. And for 5,000 power, it's not that terrible either. So you can easily just get an attacker immediately. And the -2,000 means that if your opponent has a problematic card with 7,000 power, it means that you can just play Queen and hit into that. So I think this is a solid card that will likely see some play. Next is the uncommon for Kurozumi Orochi. He's cost 1, a wisdom attribute. That doesn't make any sense. Power 2,000, counter 2,000, who's from the land of Wano and is also from the Kurozumi. So on play, you can reveal a artificial devil fruit smile from your deck and add it to your hand and then shuffle your deck. I know there is a smile card, I'm pretty sure it's an event, but I don't know how the smile deck is supposed to look like. So I'm actually really interested to see what happens as we look more into the cards that we're going to be seeing today. Next, we have Kurizumu Semimaru. Kind of surprised they gave him a shout out, but cool. He's a cost 2 special attribute, power 3000, counter 1000. Land of Wano is also Kurizumi, and Kurizumi characters other than himself can't be knocked out in battle. This is okay. It depends on how many Kurizumis that we end up having uh, in this set that will make it matter. But a lot of the time, at least based on the other one that we just saw with Orochi, that's not something you care about killing in battle. It doesn't protect out of battle, so in a purple mirror match against Kaido, this doesn't do much. It really does depend on how good the Kurizumi type characters we get currently are. It will maybe be better down the line in other sets if we get a bunch of other Kurizumi to make a full Kurizumi deck, because there isn't a Kurizumi leader, so you're going to be playing this with King or Kaido probably. So I think this is something, if you really like this style of card and if you like the idea of the smile deck, you're going to want to pick up, but I don't think it'll see play this early on just because there aren't enough Kurizumi type cards. Next is Kurizumi Higurashi, who is cost 2, special attribute, power 3, counter 1 from the Land of Wano, and is also a Kurizumi and is also a blocker. Now, this is a very interesting combo. I am actually going to be taking a little bit back from what I said with Semimaru, because blocker makes this the new target of the attack, which means that if you have Higurashi and Semimaru, you can block with Higurashi, it won't be knocked out in battle thanks to Semimaru, and then you can keep reusing Higurashi as a blocker for later turns. I think that's a very cool combo, and this is why I'm glad that I'm doing all of this as reading all of these for the first time, because I got to discover something like this out of the blue instead of being able to, I don't know, be spoiled by that. I think this is a very interesting interaction, and I think will make for a really neat budget Kurizumi build. So I think that's a very fun interaction, and I'm glad we have something like this early on. And they're not very big in power, but if you have Semimaru and 2 or 3 Higurashi, that's just 2 or 3 blockers every single turn. That's really neat. This actually might have some gas in the future. Next we have Sasaki, who's cost 3, slash attribute, power 4, counter 2, type Animal Kingdom Pirates. Dawn 1, when attacking, you can trash a card in your hand to add a card from your Dawn deck. I'm not wowed by this, mainly because it only works when it's attacking and you need to have one Dawn on it already. The Jack from the start deck does it on place, and while of course there's the argument that Sasaki can be reusable because you can attach one Dawn to it and attack, and then on a later turn attach another Dawn to it and attack again and get 2 out of it, you aren't getting any Dawn out of it the turn you play Sasaki, whereas something like with Jack, you are getting the Dawn the moment you play it, and same with ulti, and I think that's going to be more important, is just the early game mana ramp as soon as you possibly can. This is the same basic stats as Jack, so I think Jack is arguably better just because I would personally value on place over on attack, especially because if you have the Sasaki, it seems like this is the kind of thing where depending on how much Dawn you have, your opponent can just attack into the Sasaki. So if you attack with Sasaki and then they attack into Sasaki, you effectively got the same amount of Dawn as you did with Jack, just one turn later. So I'm valuing Jack over Sasaki. Speaking of, we have a rare Jack. Wow, these proportions are wild. Those are some massive titties they put on this guy. So he is cost 3, strike attribute, power 4000, counter 1000, Animal Kingdom Pirate type. On attack, Dawn -1. Your opponent trashes 1 card from their hand. I really like this. I think the deck has a lot of great ways of killing off your opponent's characters once they're in play, but being able to get out of the hand directly I think is very interesting. A lot of decks don't have insane draw power. Of course, there's the Law deck with Bonnie and Nami that can get some decent searches, but being able to interact with your opponent's hand immediately before they can use it is another avenue I think Purple would definitely benefit from going down, especially for a 3 cost, because it means unless your opponent does a kill on sight with Jack, you're going to be slowly able to start ripping cards out of their hand as the turn goes on, especially because you get 2 Dawn per turn anyways, 3 if you're playing blue-purple Kaido. So I think this is a solid card that will also probably see some form of play down the line. Scratchman Apu is a vanilla. He's a 4 cost, range type, power 6, counter 1, Animal Kingdom and on-air pirate, who is just a solidly statted beater. Kind of like I said with Queen earlier, the deck kind of needs damage output, which is why I think Scratchman might see some play. But since we're seeing things like that Queen and the Jack who has technical effect of a discard, I actually don't know if this will be seeing it, but it's nice that the deck does have access to a 4-drop 6k hitter. Next is Speed, who is cost 2, strike, attribute, power 3, counter 1, Animal Kingdom Pirate, and Smile for that Kurazumi Orochi thing that we saw earlier, and triggers, you can play the card. This depends on what the Smile deck winds up looking like. It's not that impressive of a stat line. It really is just a trigger play a card, so it's not terrible, but it definitely depends on what the Smile support looks like. So Bao Huang, who's cost 2, wisdom type, power 3, counter 1, Animal Kingdom Pirate, and also a Smile user. So on play, you can choose 2 cards from your opponent's hand, and your opponent reveals those cards. That's neat. I don't think the game right now is at a point where information on what is in your opponent's hand is vital, but it is definitely something that's going to be neat to know. I don't think you're going to be running this in a pure Kaido deck because you can't... wait, can you? Let me check Jack really quick. No, your opponent chooses what gets discarded, so it's not like if you see them, they can just trash one of them, so you don't really get any information. So this is another one where I think it's neat. It depends on what the Smile deck is going to look like, just because you don't necessarily even get that much information out of counters either. If your opponent has like 5 in hand, they can reveal 2 cards that don't have counter, and the other 3 can still have counters to defend them when you make your attacks. So I don't think the information you get out of this is super pivotal, but again, it has a Smile attribute. It depends what that Smile deck looks like. Next is the uncommon Basil Hawkins, cost 4, slash attribute, power 2, counter 1, Animal Kingdom and Hawken Pirate. So it's on play, add a Dawn and rest it. Trigger, you can play this card. This might also have some potential. It costs more than Jack, and it has less power, the Jack from the start deck. But it's on play for free. You don't need to trash anything, and it has the trigger effect. I think that just because of how low its power is relative to its cost, the trigger isn't enough to make up for it. I think I'd still probably prefer Jack over this, just because drawing into this is gonna hurt. You are never gonna want to draw into this. This is something you're gonna want to get off of the trigger. But because it comes in as rest for balance, you can't even play it as the trigger and then use the Dawn you get for a counter card. So I don't think Basil is going to be making it into the final build, but this is something, again, I could very well be wrong on. Next is Babanuk, power 5, range attribute, cost 5, sorry, power 7, counter 1, Animal Kingdom Pirate, and Smile. There really are a lot of Smile cards I'm realizing, so there might be some solid payoff that we see with that Smile event that Orochi alluded to. But this is just a decently statted card. This is what we expect, I think. 3 costs come with 5, 4 costs come with 6, and 5 costs come with 7, all of those with counters. So I think this just makes sense given its stat line. So again, depends on what the Smile is going to look like. Hirokiri Kamizo, again, beautiful art. I just love that pose. I love the color palette, the moonlight in the back with the snow. This is an art piece. I love the art they did with the purple cards. So it's cost 4, attribute slash, power 5, counter 1. Type is a supernova, a kid pirate, spoiler alert if you're not caught up, and a Smile user as well. On KO, Dawn -1, you can KO one of your opponent's characters with cost 5 or less. I think we actually saw this yesterday with one of the red cards. I'm torn on this. I think on KO cards are a bit underrated. I might have alluded to this in yesterday's video, just because your opponent can easily avoid attacking into Kamizo to begin with, and its stats aren't bad, but I don't think they're so impressive that your opponent's going to want to immediately kill it. But it's not bad. It's kind of like Who's Who. It costs one more, but it comes with 2 extra power, and Who's Who is on place for the same cost, whereas this is on KO. So I think this is comparable, and I think it definitely depends on what the meta looks like, where if it's going to be if the main meta is attacking into your opponent's creatures or a lot of effect knockouts, then this might be seeing a lot more play. But I can definitely, I'm very torn. I think it has potential, but I'm not as sold on it as I was on some previous cards. Then Who's Who is an uncommon for cost 2, attribute slash, power 3, counter 1, an Animal Kingdom pirate type, whose effect is Dawn 1 during your turn. If you have 8 or more Dawn, it gets 2. That's a typo on this site. It only gets power 1000, as you can see from the text box on the actual card. This website should probably change that. So this isn't great. I'm going to be honest. It's basically like a worse Zoro from the Red Start deck, and of course the colors are different, but you have to wait until it hits 8th. You have 8 Dawn, and when you hit 8 Dawn, it only becomes a 6k hitter, which is, I think it requires too much setup. I think if it had maybe a higher base stat and it got less, or you just needed less Dawn on the field, it would have seen play, but I'm very much not impressed by Who's Who. Fukurokuju, who is cost 6, special attribute power 8. I think that's quite solid for that stat line, and counter 1. It's a Land of Wano and Animal Kingdom pirate type. So this is actually quite solid because, as I said earlier with Babanuk, it seems that the average stat line for cards with counter 1 and no effect is your power is 1 above the cost. So you have, looking into the Babanuk, who was 5 cost, counter 1, but 7 power. There are also 4 cost, 1 power, and I think 5 or 6 power. So I think this isn't bad. Again, I doubt this will see play just because it's a 6 drop and there are other things that you can get out of a 6 drop. The start deck King, it has 1000 less power and it doesn't have counter, but it does KO a card, so I think I would probably prefer to run that over Fukurokuju. Next is Black Maria, which is a rare, and I actually really like this art. I think this is a really interesting style with how the lighting plays off of her skin and her hair, so this is not my favorite art, but I do think it's interesting. So cost 4, attribute special, power 5, counter 1, color purple, Animal Kingdom pirate type. So its effect is it is a blocker, and on block you can go Dawn -1 to make it have power 1000. This is very interesting, actually. It is a solid stat line for that cost, and it can potentially become bigger. So if your opponent only attacks with a 5000, you can block with Black Maria and use its Dawn effect to make it so that that 5000 hitter cannot hit, and you keep Black Maria for the next turn. And if your opponent's at like 6 or 7, so giving it the extra 1 doesn't do anything, you can just not use that effect and have a decently statted blocker. I think this is very solid, and 4 drop is not that bad, especially because it's 4 drop and 5 power for a good effect. Then is Page 1, who is a rare, and it has cost 4, attribute strike, power 5, counter 1, color purple, type Animal Kingdom pirate. Its effect is on play, once per turn. That's weird. Doesn't on play imply that it would be once per turn already? Maybe this is another typo. If somebody can put in the chat what this is supposed to look like, that would be great, but because I'm kind of confused, maybe it's meant to say during your main phase once per turn. Either way, no matter what the case is, this is an effect that can only be used once during your turn, and it is Dawn -1. This character can also attack your opponent's active characters this turn. I also think this is quite neat because it gives you another avenue of being able to get rid of problematic cards. If there's a card that doesn't have rush and it's outside of your what you can knock out by effects, like with King range, hitting with 5000 from Page 1 is not that bad. Okay, so it it has to be during the main phase, not on play, because if it was on play, it doesn't have a rush, so it wouldn't be able to attack. So this is another typo. This is definitely supposed to say during the main phase, once per turn, you can go Dawn -1 to do that, unless of course it says any character can attack. There's a whole mess with this translation. Either way, point is the ability to attack active characters is something that I think we should definitely be taking into consideration as we see what cards become more problematic, and depending on how impactful rush is or not rush cards for decks that don't have access to it looks like. This is a card to keep your eye on. Next is Holedem. The art, very funny. Cost 3, attribute special, power 4, counter 1, type Animal Kingdom pirate, and it's another smile, whose effect is on KO, add a card from your Dawn deck and rest it. Like I said before, I don't think its stats are that impressive to warrant an on KO effect. Like, yeah, you could just give it 2 Dawn to make it 6, which isn't that much, especially in purple, but it's pretty easy to avoid this effect, especially for 1 Dawn. I would definitely much rather something like Jack, where while you have to discard a card, you do get the Dawn immediately, as opposed to whenever your opponent decides to KO this. If it had a rush, then maybe, but then it would probably be too strong relative to its cost. But I am not impressed by Hold'em, but it's a smile, so ooh, fun art. This is a rare for X.Drake, cost 5, attribute slash, power 5, counter 2, type Navy, probably going to be Marines in the translation, Drake pirates, and Animal Kingdom pirates, whose effect is on play, go Dawn -1. Your opponent discards a card. I like that. It is another discard. I don't know how I think I like this more than the Jack that we saw with the discard, because while Jack is on attack, this is better stats, it has a better counter, and also Jack, if your opponent just attacks into Jack, then you wind up with a net of discard 1, whereas this is on play, so you're always going to get the 1, and then you have a 5,000 attacker, which is harder to kill, and it's a decent stat line just to start with. I do like the discarding that we're getting with purple. This is neat. Next, we have the first event card, so hopefully we can start seeing the smile card soon. It is called Elephant's Marcheo. Sick. Cost 4, no. The attribute is a typo. I'm guessing it's Animal Kingdom Pirate and Smile. They really gotta fix this website. I wonder how many typos were in the red video based on how many that we're seeing here. But it's an Animal Kingdom Pirate and another Smile card. So during the main phase, you can KO one of your opponent's characters with a cost of 2 or less, then add a Dawn card from your deck and set it as active. And trigger, you can do the same thing. I don't know how I feel about this one, because in the start deck, we have the Brachio Bomber, which while it costs 2 more, you can do cost 6 or less as opposed to 2 or less. And I think its trigger effect is draw a card or get a Dawn. I forget what it does offhand. I don't think this is going to see play. I think it's just because you can only knock out a 2 or less, even though it has the trigger, I think it's just too overcosted for what we've seen other similar cards do. Finally, the uncommon, the Artificial Devil Fruit Smile. So maybe we can get an idea of what the Smile deck is supposed to do right now. So it's cost 2, Animal Kingdom Pirate, and a Smile, which is fun for that deck list. Its effect is during the main phase, you can check the top 5 cards of your deck, play a Smile character with cost 3 or less, and put them at the bottom of your deck in any order. That's very interesting. I think this definitely makes sense with a lot of the Smile cards we've seen. We've seen quite a few with 3 or less. This is a card that will definitely get better as the game develops and we get more Smile cards. At the end of this recording, I am going to go back and see how many Smile characters apply to this. But this is solid, especially because the trigger does the same thing. If you get the cost 3, you effectively, you break even an advantage, but you go plus in terms of Dawn value because you spent 2 to get 3. And the trigger effect is free if you pull it off. This is a solid card. I'm really curious what the Smile deck winds up looking like, because this is very neat. Next is Sheep's Horn, another common event, whose cost is 2. It's an Animal Kingdom Pirate type and another Smile card, whose effect is during the main phase. You can go Dawn -1 to rest one of your opponent's characters with a cost of 6 or less. I don't love it. Most cards with a cost 6 or less are going to be retired or can be knocked out by card effects anyways. It would really only apply to cost 5 or 6 cards specifically, but even then you're still going to have to hit into them. The fact that it costs 2 and you have to go Dawn -1 just isn't phenomenal, so I think this is one you can avoid. And then the uncommon Alti Mortar, whose cost is 1, and it's an Animal Kingdom Power type card. So you can go Dawn -2 for the counter, so you're absolutely going to want to spend some Dawn on your turn to use this. Your leader or one of your characters gets 2,000, then you draw a card, and the trigger is add 1 Dawn from your Dawn deck and set it as active. I think this is solid. I'm unsure if it's going to replace Bolo Breath, or Blast Breath rather, because 2,000 isn't phenomenal. Like, of course, what you're looking at is the draw and the fact that it has a trigger effect. That's what really makes this card sing. But in terms of defense, there are characters that have 2,000 counter. Yes, you don't get the draw, but you don't have to pay any Dawn to use it. I think this is at least worth looking into. Drawing a card is always good. And the Dawn 2 doesn't really matter because you get 2 Dawn during your turn anyways. A lot of the games I've played, I've easily made it to 10 Dawn, so going down to 8 won't matter when you go back up to 10 the next turn. So I'm definitely going to be torn between this and Blast Breath. I like that it has a trigger. I like that it gets you advantage. I just don't really care for how weak, how negligible the 2,000 is. Part of me thinks that they could have made this 3,000, and like if you have X or less in a hand, you get the draw, and then it would have been better. But I think this is another thing that you're going to want to pick up just in case, and it's worth looking at. And then is the rare event Thunder Bagua. This is going to be fun. So its cost is 2, it's a 4 Emperor and an Animal Kingdom Pirate type. So counter one of your leaders gets 4,000 power or less during the battle. There we go, there's 4,000. And if you have 2 life or less, you can add a Dawn from your Dawn deck and rest it. And trigger, you can get a Dawn and set it as active. I really like this. I honestly think this is immediately replacing Blast Breath probably, because while it does cost 1 more, it is free and you have the potential of the Dawn ramp with the 2 if you have 2 or less life. It might not immediately replace it because it does cost 1 more, and that could matter since a lot of cards for purple seem to be a big drop, so maybe that extra 1 could matter, but this is definitely another one you're going to want to look into. I like the Dawn ramp potential. Yeah, I think this is a solid card. And that wraps it up for all of the purple cards. As I said, I want to look back at all of the Smile characters just to see, because it doesn't look like there were anything that looked for any Smile type cards. It only looked for Smile characters specifically with the Devil Fruit. So, Drake isn't. Holedem is. You could play Holedem off of the artificial Devil Fruit. Not Page 1, not Black Maria, not Fukurokuju, not Who's Who. You could not play Kamizo because you have to search for a 3 or less, and Kamizo is a 4. Babanuk is a 5. Bao Huang is a 2. Speed is a 2. Scratchman doesn't have a smile, neither does Jack or Sasaki. Higurashi does not, neither does Semimaru. Orochi doesn't have a smile type either. Queen doesn't, King doesn't, Kyoshiro doesn't, the SR Kaido doesn't, Ulti doesn't, Urashima doesn't, and King doesn't, and then we're back to the leaders. So, this is definitely not... The Smile deck isn't good out of the set one. I don't think we should just mince words about that. There are only 3 cards that you can search off of the Artificial Smiles event card. A lot of the Smile cards are kind of underwhelming therein. The best thing in the Smile deck is the Kurazumi combo between Higurashi and Semimaru, where you can have recurable blockers. I think this might have potential down the line once we have more Smile attribute related cards, just because there aren't that many to begin with. The only card that actually cares about Smiles is the event card, and that only cares about Smile characters 3 or less. Not if the Devil Fruit looked for Smile cards 3 or less, then it might be better, just because you could potentially search off something like the sheep's horn. Even though it's not great, could have been searchable. But I'm not wowed by Smile. I think it has a lot of interesting design potential down the line as we see more Smiles and as we see more Kurizumis, because there clearly seems to be overlap therein. But I think looking at all of these cards reaffirms what I said at the beginning, where I am probably most excited to see purple cards. I have very little experience with blue or green. Most of my games comes from the tutorial app, so I know in terms of my knowledge, it goes purple, red, green, blue. I know a little bit of green because I've seen some green-red gameplay, and I've seen some other green card combos like Bonnie with Raizo. So I think there's a lot of interesting potential with that, but I am still, as I said, most excited for the purple deck. I wonder if anything in the upcoming videos will change it, because I really want to emphasize I have not seen most of these cards. I am reading a lot of these at the same time as you are. So thank you again for watching this video. Like, comment, subscribe. If you have anything you want to see from me later down the line, please let me know. Comment down below what color and what deck you are most excited for out of this set, and what deck you want to see later down the line. I know set 2 is going to have Marines as one of the colors we've been missing. So yeah, thank you again for watching, and I hope to see you in the next one.